hunted by the past. The dense jungle stretched endlessly beneath Kalen's weary gaze, the heavy air thick with the scent of damp earth and distant smoke. His legs burned from running, but he couldn't stop. Not now. His people, the Valak, were relentless hunters. Once they marked someone as prey, there was no escape. He stumbled forward, pain shooting up his side where his armor had cracked from a previous battle. His once pristine warrior's gear was now scorched and torn, barely clinging to his frame. His dark, metallic skin was smeared with dirt and blood, a cruel testament to his fall from grace. Traitor. The word echoed in his mind. It wasn't true. He had only done what was right. But in the eyes of his kind, defying orders was worse than death. Thunder rumbled overhead. A storm was coming. He pushed onward, forcing his body through the thick undergrowth. His vision blurred. His muscles screamed. Then, through the haze of exhaustion, he saw it, a structure, hidden within the jungle. Small, metallic, human-made. His mind sharpened with instinct. He had been taught that humans were weak, incapable of true combat. Yet, he had heard whispers of outposts on the edges of war zones, places where human engineers and medics operated in secrecy. His body betrayed him before he could think further. His knees buckled, and the world tilted sideways. As he collapsed, the last thing he saw was a figure rushing toward him, the sound of hurried footsteps blending with the first drops of rain. Nina crouched beside the unconscious figure, her breath catching in her throat. An alien. A Valak, no doubt, tall, imposing, his armor barely holding together. The eerie blue glow from his wounds flickered dimly, signaling that his body was struggling to heal itself. What the hell happened to him? Her instincts screamed at her to leave him. She had spent too long keeping her outpost hidden. Helping him could expose her, bring danger to her doorstep. But Nina wasn't the kind of person who could watch someone die. With a frustrated sigh, she grabbed the alien's arm, hauling him toward the shelter of her outpost. "You better not kill me for this," she muttered under her breath. Inside, the small facility hummed with low energy. She had built it herself, using scraps from abandoned stations. It wasn't much, but it was home. She dragged the unconscious warrior onto the medical table, assessing his injuries. His body was covered in deep cuts, bruises, and burns. His armor, though advanced, was in ruins. Grabbing her tools, she got to work. As she worked, Nina couldn't help but wonder. Who was this Valak? And why had he been running? A sharp inhale made Nina spin around. The alien's eyes snapped open, dark, piercing, filled with barely restrained fury. Before she could react, he moved. Faster than she expected, he lunged, knocking over a tray of instruments as he grabbed her wrist in a vice-like grip. "Where am I?" His voice was rough, his alien accent thick. Nina stayed still, keeping her voice calm. "You're safe. I found you outside, half dead." His grip tightened. "Who are you?" "Nina," she said, wincing. "And if you want to keep that arm, you should let go." He hesitated, then released her. His gaze flickered around the room, taking in the surroundings. He looked back at her, suspicion in his eyes. "Why would a human help me?" Nina crossed her arms. "Maybe because I'm not in the habit of letting people die on my doorstep." He watched her for a long moment before exhaling, wincing as he touched his side. "You were injured," she said. "Your body is still healing, but you need rest." He scoffed. "I don't have that luxury." "Well, too bad," Nina shot back. "Because if you go out there now, you won't make it 5 steps." The alien's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. Nina took that as a small victory. She didn't know who he was or why he had collapsed outside her outpost, but one thing was certain. Whatever he was running from, it wasn't far behind. A fragile truce. The silence between Nina and the alien warrior stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap at any moment. Kalen, he had grudgingly given his name after she had practically forced it out of him, sat on the edge of the medical table, his posture tense. Though his body was still weak from his injuries, his sharp gaze never wavered from her, watching every move she made as if she were the enemy. Nina sighed, rubbing a hand over her face. She had dealt with plenty of difficult patients in her time, but this one was another level of stubborn. "Look," she said, placing a nutrient pack on the table beside him. "You don't have to trust me, but you do need to eat if you want to recover. I don't know how your metabolism works, but I figure you need something to keep your strength up." Kalen eyed the pack with open suspicion. "What is this?" "Basic sustenance. Nothing fancy, but it'll keep you from collapsing again." He hesitated before picking up the pack, studying it as though expecting it to explode in his hands. Then, without a word, he punctured the top with his sharp teeth and drained it in one go. Nina watched, both fascinated and slightly horrified. "Well, that's one way to do it," she muttered. Kalen set the empty pack down and fixed her with an unreadable expression. "Why are you helping me?" She had expected the question but still sighed. "Because that's what humans do." His dark brows furrowed. "That's not what I was taught." "Yeah, well," Nina shrugged, "sounds like you've been taught a lot of crap." Kalen's gaze darkened, and for a moment, she thought she had pushed too far. But instead of lashing out, he leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose, "Perhaps." That single word held a weight that surprised her. Nina took a cautious step forward. "Do you want to tell me why you were bleeding out in the middle of nowhere?" Kalen's jaw tightened. "No. Of course not." Nina bit back her frustration. "Well, you don't have to, but if there are more of your kind looking for you, I'd really like to know before they come knocking on my door." Kalen's gaze flickered toward the reinforced door of the outpost, as if considering the possibility. "They will come," he admitted. Nina's stomach twisted. "Great. Anything else I should know?" "If they find you aiding me, they will not let you live." She let out a humorless laugh. "Wow. Fantastic. I really hit the jackpot with you, huh?" Kalen gave her a sharp look, and she realized he didn't quite get sarcasm. "I can leave," he said abruptly, shifting as if to stand. "Oh, for the love of," Nina grabbed his arm before he could rise. "You're not in any condition to go anywhere. Do you even have a plan?" Kalen's silence was all the answer she needed. "Right," she huffed, shaking her head. "Then you stay here until you're strong enough to figure out your next move." He looked at her for a long moment, then, surprisingly, nodded. "Very well. A fragile truce." It was better than nothing. Nightfall. Later that night, Nina found herself sitting at her workbench, her fingers moving over a piece of damaged tech while her mind churned with questions. Kalen had fallen into a restless sleep on the cot she had set up for him, his breathing uneven. Whatever nightmares haunted him, they weren't letting go easily. She glanced toward him. Even in sleep, his body remained tense, like a coiled spring ready to strike. She had seen plenty of soldiers like that before, humans who had been through hell and back, never truly able to relax. What had this guy been through? A sudden noise outside made her freeze. Her heart pounded as she reached for her blaster. Kalen's eyes snapped open at the same time, his body tensing. "Someone's here," Nina whispered. Kalen was already moving, despite his injuries. He pressed his back against the wall near the door, his sharp senses clearly picking up something she couldn't. "How many?" she asked. He hesitated. "One." Nina frowned. "One? That's not how your people work, right?" "No," Kalen admitted. "This isn't one of mine." That didn't make her feel better. Her grip tightened on her weapon as the sound of footsteps grew closer. Whoever was outside wasn't Valak. But that didn't mean they weren't dangerous. And Nina had a sinking feeling that their night was about to get a lot worse. Shadows in the snow. The footsteps outside grew heavier, crunching against the frozen ground. Nina's heart pounded in her chest as she kept her blaster aimed at the door. She wasn't about to take any chances, not after everything that had already happened. Kalen, despite his injuries, was eerily still, his sharp eyes locked onto the entrance like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then came the knock, 3 slow, deliberate raps against the metal door. Nina exchanged a glance with Kalen. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to ambush them. At least, not yet. "Who is it?" she called out, keeping her voice steady. Silence. Then, a male voice, deep, but cautious. "I'm not here to fight." Nina narrowed her eyes. That wasn't exactly reassuring. "Doesn't answer my question," she shot back. A pause. Then, the name's Joran. "I saw lights from a distance. Needed shelter." Nina's mind raced. Joran. Not a Valak name. Was he human? Another stranded traveler? Or worse, someone hired to track Kalen down? Kalen seemed to be thinking the same thing. His muscles coiled, ready for action. Nina sighed. There was only one way to figure this out. She took a slow step forward, reaching for the door's manual override. "If you try anything, I swear to God, I'll blast you into next week," she warned. "Noted," Joran said dryly. With a quick glance at Kalen, she unlatched the door and pulled it open just enough to see the man outside. He was tall, bundled in a thick coat lined with synthetic fur, his dark beard dusted with snow. His piercing green eyes flickered between her and the dimly lit space behind her. "You alone?" Nina asked. Joran gave a short nod. "Yeah. Just looking for a place to warm up." Nina hesitated. She didn't trust easily. She had learned not to. But out here, in the middle of nowhere, turning someone away could mean their death. "Fine," she muttered. "Come in. But keep your hands where I can see them." Joran stepped inside, brushing snow off his shoulders as he took in the small outpost. The second his gaze landed on Kalen, his body stiffened. "Valak," he muttered. Nina tensed. "You've seen his kind before?" Joran's jaw tightened. "I've seen what they can do." Kalen didn't move, but Nina could feel the tension radiating off him. "So have I," she said carefully. "But this one isn't trying to kill me. Yet." Joran exhaled sharply. "That's a first." Kalen finally spoke, his voice low. "If I wanted you dead, human, you wouldn't have made it past the door." Joran let out a humorless chuckle. "Good to know." Nina groaned. "Great. Now that we've all established we can kill each other, how about we focus on what really matters?" "Which is?" Joran asked. "Why you're really here." Joran hesitated, then sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. "I wasn't lying. I was passing through. Saw the light. Figured this place was abandoned, but..." His eyes flicked to Kalen again. "Looks like I was wrong." Nina studied him. She had a gut feeling there was more to the story, but pressing him right now wouldn't get her anywhere. "You can stay for the night," she finally said. "But in the morning, we figure out what happens next." Joran nodded, stepping further inside. But Nina didn't miss the way he kept his distance from Kalen. Or the way Kalen watched him, as if he expected betrayal at any moment. Hidden truths. Later that night, after Nina had checked Kalen's wounds again and made sure Joran wasn't about to stab them in their sleep, she found herself staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning. She didn't know who to trust. Kalen was still a mystery, dangerous yet oddly restrained. Joran, on the other hand, clearly had history with the Valak. She needed answers. Whispers of betrayal. The dim glow from the small heating unit cast flickering shadows against the walls of the abandoned outpost. Nina sat near Kalen, still wary of Joran, who leaned against the opposite wall, arms crossed, his green eyes unreadable. Sleep had been impossible. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kalen had barely spoken since Joran arrived, his sharp gaze studying the man's every move. Nina couldn't blame him. Something about Joran's sudden appearance didn't sit right with her either. She had survived this long by trusting her instincts, and right now, every fiber of her being was telling her that Joran was hiding something. The uneasy truce. So, Nina said, breaking the silence. Where exactly were you headed before you stumbled on us? Joran shrugged, his expression carefully neutral. Just moving through. I trade supplies between settlements. Kalen let out a quiet scoff. Convenient that a trader would end up in the middle of nowhere, during a storm, right next to an outpost that just happens to be sheltering a fugitive Valak. Joran's jaw tightened. I didn't know you were here. Didn't you? Kalen's voice was low, but the dangerous edge was unmistakable. Nina sighed, rubbing her temples. Okay, we're not getting anywhere with this. Joran, if you're just a trader, why do you seem so damn nervous around Kalen? Joran hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for Nina to catch it. Then, he exhaled sharply. Because I know what the Valak are capable of. Kalen's expression didn't change, but his fingers flexed slightly, as if resisting the urge to grab a weapon. You're not the first human to think that, he said. Joran's eyes darkened. No, but I might be one of the only ones still alive to say it. Nina's breath hitched. There was something heavy in his tone, something that hinted at a past filled with blood and loss. You had a run-in with them before, she guessed. Joran nodded slowly. They attacked a colony I was stationed at 5 years ago. No warning. No mercy. They killed half the settlement before we even understood what was happening. Nina stole a glance at Kalen, but his face was unreadable. And yet, Joran continued, you expect me to sit here, in the same room as one of them, and believe he's different? I don't expect you to believe anything, Nina shot back. But you don't know his story. You don't know why he's here. Joran's gaze flicked to Kalen. So why are you here? For a long moment, Kalen didn't answer. Then, finally, he spoke. Because my own kind turned on me, he said. Because I refused to follow orders that would have slaughtered innocent people. Nina stiffened. She hadn't heard this part yet. I was sent to lead an attack, Kalen continued, his voice steady but grim. But when I saw what they wanted me to do, what they expected me to become, I disobeyed. And they exiled you for it, Nina murmured. Kalen nodded. They don't tolerate weakness. They don't tolerate defiance. The second I hesitated, they decided I was as good as dead. Joran's expression remained hard, but something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe. Nina leaned forward. So you see? Kalen isn't the monster you think he is. Joran exhaled, shaking his head. I don't know what to think anymore. Neither did Nina. The storm outside, the storm within. The wind howled against the outpost, rattling the metal walls like an angry beast. Nina stood near the entrance, staring at the swirling snow outside, her thoughts racing. They were all trapped here, for now. But eventually, the storm would pass. And when it did, what then? Would Joran try to turn Kalen in? Would Kalen even let him live long enough to try? Nina had always worked alone. She had never had to worry about anyone but herself. But now, she had a decision to make. Who did she trust? And who was going to betray them first? The final stand. The wind outside had begun to die down, but inside the outpost, tension hung heavier than ever. Nina could feel it pressing against her chest, an invisible weight that had been growing since Joran's arrival. She stood between the two men, watching them carefully. Kalen, the exiled Valak warrior, was a man who had lost everything because he chose to defy his people. Joran, the hardened traitor, carried scars from a past where the Valak had been his enemy. And Nina? She was stuck between them, caught in a war that wasn't hers, yet somehow, she had become a part of it. But the truth was, time had run out. The betrayal revealed. A loud crack echoed through the small outpost. Joran had drawn his blaster. "Step away from him, Nina," Joran ordered, his voice cold, unwavering. Nina's pulse spiked. "What the hell are you doing?" Kalen didn't move, his golden eyes locked onto Joran, assessing, waiting. Joran tightened his grip on the weapon. "I lied about being a traitor. I've been tracking Valak movements for months. My job is to report any rogue warriors." Nina's stomach twisted. "So you were never lost. You were hunting him." "The moment I saw him, I knew," Joran admitted. "He's a fugitive, Nina. The Valak don't tolerate deserters, but if I turn him in, they'll pay me more than I could make in 5 years of trading." Kalen's expression didn't change. "So that's your price?" Joran shrugged. "We all do what we have to in order to survive." Nina's hands curled into fists. She had survived by being smart, by trusting her instincts. And right now, those instincts were screaming at her to move. Kalen met her gaze, and in that moment, she knew, he wasn't going to fight back. He wasn't going to kill Joran. Because despite everything, he didn't want to be that kind of warrior anymore. But Nina? She had no such hesitation. Choosing sides. Before Joran could react, Nina lunged. She grabbed the edge of the blaster and shoved it upwards just as Joran fired. A bolt of energy seared the ceiling, sending sparks raining down. Joran snarled, trying to wrestle the gun back, but Nina drove her knee into his stomach, knocking him off balance. Kalen moved in an instant. He twisted Joran's wrist, forcing him to drop the weapon. The fight was over in seconds. Joran gasped for air, pinned beneath Kalen, his face contorted with rage. "You're making a mistake," he spat. Nina picked up the blaster, aiming it at him. "No, you are." Joran glared at her, then at Kalen. "You think the Valak won't find him eventually? You think they'll just let this go?" Kalen let out a slow breath. "I don't know. But I won't live my life running in fear." Nina nodded. "And neither will I." She looked down at Joran. "You have 2 choices. You leave here and never speak of this, or," she let the threat hang in the air. Joran's jaw clenched. Then, slowly, he nodded. Kalen released him, stepping back. Joran shot one last glare at them both before disappearing into the storm. A new beginning. When the silence returned, Nina turned to Kalen. "So what now?" He studied her for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted. Nina sighed. "Me neither." But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.